Are you lost in the chaotic whirlwind of day-to-day busyness? Do you yearn for a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in your life? Welcome to Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose, the podcast dedicated to empowering women on their journey of self-discovery and finding their true purpose through their own story. I'm your host, Brenda Simmons. Welcome to episode 5 of the Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose podcast. I'm so glad that you could be here with us today. On our last podcast, we had Bryn Randall visit us. She is the creator of Austin University, the TV show. She also runs an after-school program, and she does a podcast. So many things within the media world, and it's super fun to see what she is doing and how she has found her purpose of teaching others through this media medium. And so I wanted to, and what I really love is how what she values is so apparent in her purpose. You know, she creates holistic TV shows and activities for people. She develops relationships with those around her, including youth as well as adults. She stretches herself. She talked a lot about this, of how learning and growing in different ways was so important to her, and how she was able to accomplish this in what she is doing all the time. So here's what I've learned, that the more you get to know people, the more their values shine through, the more apparent it is what they believe is really, really important. So I'm curious, have you thought about what your values are? So maybe we'll go over what values aren't first. Values are not skills. They're not strengths. They're not talents. They're not weaknesses. That's not what a value is. A value is something that you hold to be very important. It is your principles, your standards of behavior. And it's what you judge to be important in your life. And really, it is your values that guide the way in which you live your life. And so let me give you some examples. So let's say you value adventure. If that is a value, then you're going to look for ways to fill your life with adventure, maybe through traveling. Maybe it's trying different things. Maybe it's the adventure is meeting new people all the time. So you're going to approach life in a way that creates more adventure for you. If you have a value of freedom, then you're going to find ways to maybe defend and lift oppression in your own life as well as for others. Or it could simply be like a boundary change that creates the ability for greater choices. So you're going to always be looking for ways to create more freedom. Let's say you have a value of family. And so if you have that high value, then you're going to seek for opportunities to spend time with and support your family. How about security? Let's say if you have a high security value, you're going to put in safeguards against home, personal, or financial calamities. So these are just examples. And the way in which the values play out in your own life is going to be totally individual to you. So more than one person can have a top value of freedom, for example, but the way in which it's interpreted could be completely different, and that's totally fine. Now, my top value is truth. And so I constantly look for truth in the world around me, but also inside of me. And so I'm always looking for what is the truth of my emotions? What's the truth of my thoughts? How am we talked about this in our last Thursday episode. So I'm always trying to define the world around me in the lens of what is truth. So my number 2 value is authenticity, kind of related to truth. But I believe that being totally authentic is being true to who you really are. So no games, no hypocrisy. And I have a high standard for other people, but an even higher standard for myself to be truly authentic. Of course, I make mistakes, but what happens is when I do make a mistake, my high standard of authenticity forces me to course correct to be in alignment with my values. So I'm constantly doing that all the time. It also really helps to have kids who will call me out on my hypocrisy as well. So they have a really high authenticity value as well. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind when you are looking at your values. You can and you should have multiple values. So I have a list of top 10 values, and I look at this all the time. And another thing to keep in mind is your values will change over time. It's not an if, but they do. They change over time because we have circumstances and we learn different things. And so when those things happen, then that may cause us to really value something different that we may not have had before that experience. So it's a really good idea to review your values once a year at the minimum. If you're going through a lot of change, maybe you'll want to do it 2 or 3 times a year. And it's just a really good way to understand what's important to you. And I will get back to that in just a little bit. So how do you do this? Well, there's a really good way to do this actually. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to get a piece of paper, pen or pencil, or if you want to do this on the computer, totally fine, however you want to do that. But you're going to think about the things that are the most important to you, and you're just going to write them all down. You're not putting them in any order. You're just getting them out of your brain and onto paper. Then what I like to do is get a list of values. And if you just Google or do an internet search for values or just a list of values, then you'll have a lot of different options. So I always try to go for the list that has the most because I like to have lots of options. I always want to keep options open. And so I have found that Brene Brown has a really great one. Oh, she's got like over 100, maybe 120 different values on there. And I really like hers a lot. And I'll actually put a link to that on my show notes. So you're going to want to go through that list of values and see if you've missed any. And if you have, write those down as well. Now, you're going to have a whole bunch on there, and that's totally okay. But you're going to start narrowing them down now. Okay. So you're going to narrow that list down to 30. And then you're going to narrow it down to 20. And then down to 10. Now, the way to narrow it down is you're going to look at, okay, not only is you're going to look at what are more important than the others, but maybe are there certain values that can be within another value? So for example, I highly value family, but I also highly value communication and connection in all of its forms. And so for me, connection is a higher value than family because it's not just family that I want to connect with. It's those relationships that I find are very, very important. So even though family isn't technically on my top 10, that connection is, and family is wrapped up into connecting. So that's just a way that you can process that. Okay, so now that you've got your list down, from 30 down to 20, then down to 10, you're going to put those in order of most important to least important. And I actually like to start with the least important first and work my way backwards because it's that process of elimination that really helps me know, oh, this really is the most important thing. And so then once you've got them in your top 10 and in order of most important to least important, then I like to put them in a phrase or a sentence. So this kind of reminds me of when I was in high school, my junior teacher, English teacher, Mrs. Pugh, we always had to do vocabulary. And when we were doing vocabulary, part of the exercise was to take your vocabulary word and put it in a sentence that describes the vocabulary word that you're using. And so similar to that, you can try that here, or you can just do a descriptive phrase like, so for me, for my value of truth, I say, I am governed by truth. And so it's a descriptive for me, knowing, okay, I value this so much that I'm governing my whole life based on what is true. And so you can be a little bit more descriptive, like what I said previously, or just make it into a very simple phrase. Totally up to you. But it's something that jogs your memory on why you feel like this value is so important to you. So once you've got that all done, Then you're going to take some time. And by this, I mean, give it a week to really sink in and to really observe. And you're going to reflect, are these truly my top 10 values? And you may find that you've missed one. And so this totally happened to me. I just recently did this exercise again, and just within the last 2 or 3 months. And I got my whole list done. And then one morning I was just kind of writing in my gratitude journal and reflecting and kind of looking at what I've been able to accomplish this year. And the thought came to me, I really value progress. And the light went off, and I thought, oh my goodness, do I even have that down on my top 10 list of values? And I went back and looked at it, and sure enough, I did not have it there. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is so, so important to me. I need to make sure that this gets on my top 10. And so I was able to revamp it, and it's in there now. And it was so interesting to me how I just had to take that time to really let it sink in. What is truly important to me? And you will find that as you ponder it and as you think about what is the most important, that if you have missed anything, it will come to you. And so then you just go back and revamp it. And sometimes you may have to kick something out. In this case, it was related to something else. And so I kind of squoze it in there. And so I kind of have a twofer in there, but it works for me. So why is it important to understand what your values are? Well, there's several reasons, but here's three. Number one, it is a really good way to get to know yourself. And the more that we know ourselves, the stronger we become mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Have you ever heard that phrase? If you don't know what you stand for, you don't stand for anything, right? And it's kind of that same principle. You have to know what your values are, so that when opposition comes into in your face, because it will eventually, what your boundaries are and what you are willing to do and not willing to do. And so it's a really, really great way for you to understand yourself. Number two, it's a great way it's a tool for self-reflection. So I like to take that list and then go back to it often and go, okay, am I living in alignment with my values? And if I'm not, then I need to figure out, okay, why and what's going on to prevent me from doing that. And then I need to figure out, okay, what do I need to do to make a change to create that alignment? Now, I have had moments in my life when I have looked at my top 10 values and realized I am not in alignment with them. I'm not living my life in accordance to how I think I should live. And if that continues over time, and I know from experience, this is what happens, you will feel out of sorts. You will lose self-confidence. You will lose self-esteem. You will lose trust in yourself. And so it's really, really important to live your life in a way in which it is in alignment with what you believe and how you believe you should act. And when you do, the opposite happens. You have greater trust in yourself. You have high self-esteem. You have high confidence. And you are able to conquer challenges a lot more easily, because you know that the way in which you're living your life is in alignment with how you believe it should be. All right, so that was number two. Number three, so number one was a good way to get to know yourself. Number two was it's a good self-reflective tool. And number three, it's a good way to see who you associate with. And if those with whom you associate are supportive of your values as well. Now, don't get me wrong. I actually believe that it's really good to associate with people of all different backgrounds, all different values. However, you want to be careful that the people with whom you associate aren't going to try to compromise your own values, or try to get you to compromise your own values. And so that's really important. My general rule is the closer the relationship, the more in alignment with your own values you want that other person to be. So for example, let's say you are married and your spouse, you value work, right? This totally not thinking about anybody, but this is just an example. So let's say you value work and you work really, really hard, but your spouse doesn't. And so your spouse maybe watches TV all day. Again, totally hypothetical. Um, you're going to have some problems within that relationship if you are so out of alignment in that value of work. Another one is honesty, right? If you, let's say you've got a group of people at work, right? And let's say that you hang out with them, but you're finding that, if, let's say you value honesty greatly, but you're finding that your coworkers don't. Well, do you really want to hang out with them outside of work? So you really have to understand where, not only where your values are at, but do the people you associate with support those values as well? Again, get to know people of all different walks of life. I think that's super important. But those in your close circle should have similar values to you. Okay, so I have a challenge for you. This week, go through your values. Just figure out what are the most important values to you. You will learn a great deal about yourself and see if you are in alignment with those values. And if you're not, figure out why and what you need to do to change. That way, you can live your own purpose better and brighter and bigger every day. I hope this has been helpful to you, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Celebrate your dreams, let them take flight, for you are a star, shining bright in every step you take. Let your